Dennis, I don't know how invested you are in bowl games anymore with the expansion of the college football playoffs. Just some thoughts on bowl games in general, the ones that don't have the same kind of substance that we once had, like this one right here with A&M and USC. And what do you want them to do in the future with the bowl games?
I think it's a referendum on Lincoln Riley, which way the program is headed, who's bought in, can they compete in the Big Ten, what's his next stop, the things souring there. And then for A&M, I think if you have a quarterback these days, it's like having a pound of gold. And A&M has a quarterback, and Reed has something to look forward to, something to build on. If not for a couple of happenstances, they might be in this playoff. And in the SEC, which has got how many bowl slots are there? 13 or 14 or 15, something like that.
Seems like it.
They're always going to be in it. I mean, they're very close to getting to a playoff spot. I did say in 2 years I will bet my house if this field expands to 14. And those spots aren't going to go to Marshall or Boise State. Those are going to go to Big Ten and SEC schools.
Hey, so Dennis, why are you so high on Marcel Reed?
Well, the fact that you have a guy who's quote unquote proven. He's got some rough edges, obviously. I love his athleticism. You see very few teams that are good. Let's put it that way. That don't have some form of a plus one. And a plus one is a quarterback who can at least create things for himself. And that, Marcel Reed isn't a refined thrower. I think that can be worked on. But those games he had this year, some of those bigger games he had this year, I mean, he looked Lamar Jackson-like. And I know a lot of Aggies out there going, what is he talking about? I think that's the upside you build on.
All right. Talking to Dennis Dodd here on TexAgs Live. So just a little bit on Coach Elko. And obviously this, as you mentioned a moment ago, they were a play or two away from maybe competing in the SEC championship game. Yep. I know the Texas game was not pretty, but they had their chances in that game overall, even with no offense. What do you think about the job Coach Elko did in year one and what he can build on for year two?
I think it was good. Again, some disappointing results of Texas, obviously, and USC, which is still a little bit, we were just talking about USC and how that went, but at the beginning of the season, excuse me. I think it was good. I think it's something to build on. I'm not going to sit here and say, it was a home run, because it wasn't. But I think at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, there was disappointment from Notre Dame, obviously. It was tough, but, in between, they showed signs. I mean, the wrecking crew showed signs of coming back. The defense is okay. Again, after 1 year, let's give these guys a chance. We don't have that anymore, obviously, but you got to give them a chance. I think he's a hell of a coach. Any guy who can get Riley Leonard to where he got and win 9 games at Duke, there's something to be said for that. And I think any evaluation of the major conference these days goes to the point that in any given year, your schedule is a crapshoot, because these leagues are so big now. You're going to miss half the teams you play in the league. And again, in any given year, it could be tremendously tough, or it could be easy. It could be Indiana. So your schedule is a function of that. A&M, because the teams they have to play, because the teams they want to play, it's probably never going to be easy. But I think there's been progress the first year.
Look, the Aggies are hoping to beat USC tonight, and that'll give them a 9-win season. Only their third time in like 11 years they will have reached 9 wins. So That's not a small accomplishment for A&M. But should bowl games now even count in your record, considering that so often we don't see a true representation of that team in a bowl game? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the most extreme examples of that are Florida State last year. There was, obviously it started a few years ago with Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette opting out. Yeah, I mean, look, it is what it is. I thought that was a great game last night in Phoenix with Kansas State, and who'd they play in the Rake Bowl? That was Rutgers. Oh, that was a great bowl game. It's like both teams just winging it. Kansas State has plenty of upside with Avery Johnson. I think Rutgers, going to a bowl is like a Super Bowl for them. Yeah, I think there's a lot to take from these things. And I did a story earlier this month about how there's this vague idea now with the bowl season. That's, that's what this organization runs the bowls below the playoff. And it's called trademark, the bowl season. They are trying to reimagine things to make these more attractive, whether that's taking part of the payout and ensuring that some of these players play. We saw what Coach Prime did with Oklahoma. They've got some of the better players covered by insurance, which frankly these days, why wouldn't you? I mean, when that story came out, wait a minute, why aren't these guys covered? But there's going to be ways, and they're thinking about them right now, to make some of these games more attractive. And if they're not, they'll fall by the wayside. I think we're at the tipping point with 44? I think the number is 44. That's way too many, I think. But as long as ESPN, which owns about 40 of these games, as long as they do a rating number, they'll be on TV and there'll be that many. So I take interest in a lot of these things. Yeah, should they count? Absolutely, they should count. I mean, you get into this to play, but we all know what the forces going against these guys are now.
Talking on Dennis Dodd here on TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. I want to ask you something that's college basketball related, but it's really about the health of college athletics. Jim Larrañaga yesterday stepping down, resigning, thinking that he doesn't love the direction of college sports in general, and talked about some of his players after the Final Four saying that they were going to transfer, although I think he kept most of those guys. We've seen some big-name coaches step down. Nick Saban in football didn't say directly this was the reason, but it was certainly a part of the discussion. New guard coming in, old guard leaving. What's the future going to look like, Dennis?
Yeah, I think the future is, people ask me that, and I go, the future is Steve Sarkisian. When he was presented with this question, he just bluntly said, we're like dinosaurs. You either adapt or die. And that, you may not like that answer, but what's happening and what Jim Larrañaga is complaining about is going to be the norm. The transfer portal isn't going away. Even if the NCAA gets help in Congress, players are still going to be able to transfer after a year or two. They may get some help on that. And they're going to have to remanage their rosters every year. There was a lawsuit filed, I think it was last week, by Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt, who's going to get another year of eligibility because his lawyers argued that why should junior colleges count as a year of eligibility? Prep schools don't. And I think that's a hell of a thing. So now I think it's a hell of an argument. So now we're probably, when the NCAA steps down, we're probably looking at 7 years of eligibility now, 2 years in JUCO, 5 to play 5. And I think that's okay. I think that's great. And if you don't want to be in it, if you don't want to reorganize, I always tell people, give me the $9 million. I'll figure it out. That's a simple way of saying it. But this is college sports right now. This is what it's going to be.
And Dennis, I'd really love to get your thoughts on the way the controversy, if you can call it that, from Ole Miss and South Carolina and Alabama, that felt like that they should have been in the playoff because of strength of schedule over a team like SMU or maybe even Indiana. So your thoughts on what that whole strength of schedule argument, and did those SEC teams have a leg to stand on?
No, you can't. First of all, they lost 3. It used to be in the BCS. So you remember this. I used to say in the BCS, if you lost 1 when there was only 2 teams, you had no room to argue. You might get in, you might not, but you lost. Now it's 3. You might get in, you might not, but don't come to me with a case, because it's in the hands of those 13 people whose opinions matter. And when you lose to Vanderbilt, and when you lose, they beat Georgia. When Alabama lost to who else did they get beat by? They didn't even show up for Oklahoma by 3 touchdowns. Sorry, excuse me. You don't even show up for that. I don't. And combining that with Lane Kiffin, tweeting his case when you got beat by a 4-8 Kentucky at home. Please, I did this story last spring in Destin where it was like opening up a can of gunpowder. Hey, should 9-3 teams be considered in the SEC and all these coaches, and they go, oh, yeah, no, sure. At some point, you have to win games. And we can talk about strength of schedule and everything else. But last year, and I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe the right answer is the Super League. But last year, I was among those who wrote a story quoting committee members who didn't put Florida State in. And I think this is a much bigger controversy than what we're talking about. Didn't put Florida State in at 13-0 because they didn't believe that Florida State could win the national championship. Well, that's not the protocol. None of that is written in the protocol, whether you think a team can win it all or not. They would have played with a backup quarterback, not the third-string quarterback, and they'd already gone a 13-0 Power 5 champion. That's the problem I have with that. And when did SMU at 11-1, Power 4 in the ACC become Conference USA? So that I think they absolutely deserve to be here.
Talking to Dennis Dodd here on TexAgs Live. Give us some optimism, if you will, for Arizona State to beat Texas. Is there a path forward for them?
I think Texas is bigger and faster, and unless Texas is an active participant in the upset, and by that I mean turnovers, then I don't see it. I think, what Kenny Dillingham has done as National Coach of the Year worthy. A team that's picked 16th in the Big 12 that won it, but I think this is a bad matchup for them. And you guys saw the game. I think Texas is peaking right now after what they did against Clemson. Nobody remembered they had two running backs lost for the season, C.J. Baxter and Clark, I think, the beginning of the season, and that hasn't mattered. They're a three-headed monster in the running game now. They've got an All-American at left tackle. I keep coming back to this. The only but the only thing that I hedge with is Quinn Ewers. I don't know if he's the guy. They're going to beat Arizona State. I don't know if he's the guy who can win a national championship. I want to see more of Arch. Don't know if Arch can do it, but I do think they're going to need Arch at some point. You know what I'm talking about? And I mean, other than goal line packages. At some point, they're going to need him because Quinn Ewers doesn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. He doesn't have that yet to me at this level. Top 10 team, top quarterback, but I don't know if they can win it all with him. Maybe I'm got too much time on my hands, but they will handle Arizona State.
Well, other than say Oregon, what team in the playoff do you think that's still alive has that quarterback?
I am on record. I changed my pick last week after Ohio State got past Tennessee, because I think that was a big mental hurdle for them after what they've done against Michigan and everything swirling around that program. I thought that cleared the deck. I'm picking Ohio State, and they have, what is it, number one or number two defense. If Will Howard does not turn it over and uses his legs prudently, they've arguably the best receiver room in the country, one of the best running back rooms. I think that I got a chance to. They have a chance to win this whole thing. I have them beating Notre Dame in the championship game because I think Notre Dame, the Georgia game, is a great matchup for Notre Dame if you got a minute, because backup quarterback for Georgia. This is Georgia's worst running offense in at least a decade. It probably goes back farther than that. I couldn't find it farther back. They don't run the ball well. They're asking a backup quarterback to make plays. Meanwhile, I think Notre Dame settled in with Riley Leonard. They're back seven. Actually, their defense is great. Their secondary is awesome. And for a backup quarterback to try to beat those guys, I think it's going to be very interesting. I like Notre Dame over Georgia, frankly, in that game. So a long-winded answer to one question, but no, I think Ohio State's my team right now.
Any interest in the Penn State-Boise State game, and any thoughts on what they can do beyond whoever wins that one?
Yeah, I think it's a good matchup for Penn State because you've got to do one thing. You've got to stop Ashton Jeanty from going nuts. And I think they've got the athleticism where they can reach the Boise State quarterback, Maddox, Madsen, with four guys, especially if they have Dual Carter and the guys they have on the defensive line. So that frees up everything else to make tackles. And when teams have concentrated on Ashton Jeanty, and they do, every team does, well, to some extent or another, Maddox Madsen has shown an ability to really bail them out, throw downfield. I think that's different against Penn State. Zion Bailey is an All-American to me in the secondary for Penn State. Bigger, faster, stronger. He's 131 yards away from breaking Barry Sanders' record. He might get it, but I think Penn State, again, especially after how they played defensively against SMU, is feeling really good about itself.
All right. Well, you've just about covered the whole playoff.
Yeah.
If there is a team that can pull off an upset, if there is one that could be a surprise, and I don't go crazy and say, but if there's somebody besides one of the absolute favorites like Ohio State or Oregon or even Georgia, and maybe not, who's the team that would be the strongest dark horse, if you will?
Notre Dame, right?
Maybe Texas.
God, yeah. We kind of went out there. I think nobody's talking about Notre Dame. They're a 7th seed, whatever that means in the playoff right now. But what they did to Indiana, while not, I guess, unexpected, it was the way they did it. They run 2 or 3 running backs at you. This Jeremiah Love kid I think he's from my hometown of St. Louis. It's
very familiar with what he can do.
Yeah, as good as there is, and they just spot him. They use 2 3-headed monsters, just like Nick Saban used to do, just like Texas is doing now. They're really, really good. And again, if Riley Leonard isn't made to be a passer, a downfield passer, because how they use him is kind of a West Coast guy who throws underneath and then scrambles when he needs to, then the defense can carry him a long way. And you guys probably agree. Nobody's talking about Notre Dame, especially when it's Notre Dame, Georgia. Can't wait to see Georgia. This could be 3 championships in 4 years for them. I think they're on a roll. So I'll stick with them. If not, it's going to be really chalky, guys. It was chalky in the first round where everybody, criticized the nature of the wins, how many blowouts there could be. I think Boise State's going to be there. Oregon, Ohio State's going to be really good. But, whoever wins that, it's not going to be an upset. I think the number is Ohio State by 1.5 points last time I heard. So there's really no upset there. Arizona State, obviously, with Penn State, we'll see. Or Texas, Texas.
Dennis, man, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for your time. Let's do it again.